Following decades of unfruitful search activities by America's best crime agencies, Jimmy Hoffa's corpse has finally been discovered. The circumstances surrounding the discovery of this and the relatively normal individuals who cracked this mystery continue to make our skin crawl. Whispering was done for decades in back rooms, gangster hangouts, and government offices alike. Where is Hoffa? His vanishing did not only become a mystery, it became a legend, a reflection of the struggle for power between unions, organized crime, and the federal government. But the truth about Jimmy Hoffa was just beyond grasp, until now. What had started as a cold case that appeared fated never to be cracked erupted back into life in an instant, and what detectives discovered redefined all we had ever believed about one of America's most notorious vanishings. The spark that ignited renewed interest in locating Jimmy Hoffa's body came from a source unlikely to have been involved: Hollywood. By 2019, the rest of the world had nearly forgotten Hoffa's disappearance, focusing on other scandals and mysteries, until Martin Scorsese's release of The Irishman. The movie, an adaptation of the incendiary mob enforcer Frank Sheeran account, depicted Hoffa's last hours in grim, disturbing detail, enticed into a Detroit home, killed in cold blood, and his corpse quickly cremated to leave no trace. To many, the dramatization provided a tidy and chilling ending to a tale that had haunted generations. But nearly as fast as the movie sparked intrigue, it drew suspicion. Sheeran's credibility had long been questioned. Researchers identified gaps in his story, and the house he pointed out as the site of the crime was thoroughly scoured. Luminol found bloodstains, but none of them belonged to Hoffa. There was no gun, no DNA, and no evidence, only more shadows. And yet, The Irishman accomplished what decades of FBI excavations, mob leaks, and half-truths could not: it put Jimmy Hoffa back in the cultural conversation. All at once, his tale was everywhere once more, argued about in classrooms, crime dramas, podcasts, and dining rooms. A new generation learned of the enigma for the first time. Behind the scenes, the FBI, pushed by the success of the film and increased public pressure, pulled out old files and reopened lines of investigation. The case that would not die was alive again in secret. Working in the background, away from media scrutiny, was a private group of investigators called the Casebreakers, a non-profit coalition of retired detectives, intelligence officers, and forensic scientists. They followed up on a lead most had thrown away. The clue was gleaned from the dying treasures of a Wisconsin police officer. Among his personal effects was a solitary playing card, the Ace of Spades. Scrawled across its face, in hasty black ink, were a few enigmatic words: Milwaukee. Third base. Old Stadium. 1995. The hint was initially ridiculous, as were many others that had come before. But as the team dug deeper, the mysterious message coalesced. Third base was the name for Milwaukee County Stadium, Brewers' home until it came down in 2001. Though the location itself was no longer there, there were old satellite photographs from the 1990s that still remained. When investigators probed the imagery, they saw something unusual: a disrupted patch of clay just below the third base line. The soil seemed to have been plowed up and then hastily covered again. That abnormality was sufficient to warrant a complete investigation. Would this tipping point finally answer questions, or was it another dead end in Hoffa's long history? The Casebreakers convened forensic specialists and dirt experts. Ground-penetrating scans detected strata under the ground that didn't exist. The findings suggested one harrowing possibility: someone, or something, had been buried beneath third base. Could this actually be the resting place of Hoffa, buried beneath a stadium where thousands of people had come to cheer, unaware of what was under their feet? The group would not allow the clue to dissolve. Piece by piece, the puzzle was taking shape, and it was possible that the reality had been concealed in plain sight the entire time. By 2002, Milwaukee County Stadium was gone, and American Family Field stood in its place. In place of where third base used to be lay a plain youth baseball diamond. Kids laughed and played there every day, running bases, unaware that the dirt under their feet could be sacred ground harboring mob secrets. To investigators, however, this was not a field, it was possibly a graveyard. The K-center breakers deployed their gear. Ground-penetrating radar swept the field, layer by layer. Initially, the scans revealed nothing. The field was absolutely normal, too normal. But as the sweeps reached deeper into the ground, faint anomalies became apparent. Small displacements in the soil. Anomalies that were not natural layering. Shapes that were goosebump-inducing. And then, one find turned everything on its head, a dense layer of compacted clay, sharply defined and completely out of place. This wasn't normal. Compacted clay isn't normally found in those environments, it's placed in landfills and occasionally by individuals who wish to delay decomposition. To discover it under the ballpark, precisely where the mysterious note had indicated, seemed no accident. Though clay wasn't evidence, it certainly made them wonder. The team needed more. That's when they approached one of their most reliable resources, a cadaver dog named Moxie. Moxie was an extraordinary dog. With over 200 successful recoveries, she was the most revered cadaver dog in the nation. When her handler took her to the suspected area near third base, she didn't waste any time. Her nose buried low, she rigidified her body, took a deep breath, and stiffened. Then she sat, a definitive indication. But she didn't stop there. She circled once, twice, 3 times, always coming back to the same square of earth. During the 4th pass, she sat again, unmoving. Her handler referred to it as what it was, a high-confidence hit. The chances of both radar and Moxie both being incorrect in the same location? Practically zero. Detectives recorded coordinates, filed reports, and got ready to dig. For the first time in 40 years, there was hope. If Hoffa was buried here, the truth was finally attainable. When excavation started, the excavation was laborious. Each shovel of earth was recorded. 2 feet in, the ground shifted. The packed clay opened up, and after that, something alien appeared, organic, brittle, human. The place returned to silence. Forensic specialists soon verified, adult male remains. The samples were taken to the lab, and in a few days, the results came back. The DNA equaled Jimmy Hoffa's family markers. After almost half a century, Jimmy Hoffa's body had been discovered. But the find didn't provide the closure the world had anticipated. A second revelation shocked everyone. Forensic dating showed the body had not been buried in 1975, the year that Hoffa disappeared, but rather about 1995, 20 years later. He had been relocated. Even more terrifying, police discovered a second remains not far away, smaller, partial, of another human. Hoffa's grave was not only a resting place, it was part of an overall cover-up, a vault of secrets hidden on purpose. The case breakers issued a somber announcement, "This is disturbing." Not only was the body relocated, but also it was meticulously altered. And with finding more remains, it is evident that this tale is far from finished. The FBI quickly moved in, barricading the area. Questions proliferated. Who had relocated Hoffa's corpse? Why hide him beneath a ballpark in the mid-1990s? And who was the second casualty? What sort of authority was needed to arrange such a sophisticated ruse, obscuring the reality for decades? To get it, one has to go back to Hoffa himself. Jimmy Hoffa was no run-of-the-mill labor leader. He rose through the ranks of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and became its president in 1958 and dominated the union with an iron fist. At its height, the Teamsters had a 90% monopoly on U.S. transportation, and Hoffa wielded enormous power. But all that power came with deadly affiliations. In the 1940s, Hoffa enlisted the help of the Mafia to smother competing unions. In exchange, the mob drained billions from the Teamsters pension fund, feeding Las Vegas casinos and businesses owned by the mob. It was a convenient marriage, one that would ultimately doom Hoffa. Hoffa was in prison in 1967 for bribery and fraud. Nixon pardoned him in 1971 on the stipulation that he remain out of union activity for a decade, until 1980. Hoffa wasn't, however, a man to remain sidelined. He desired his throne once again, and speculation ran that he would reveal mob corruption within the pension fund to achieve this. By July of 1975, Hoffa was desperate, cornered, and a danger to his erstwhile supporters. On July 30, 1975, Hoffa was last seen outside the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Detroit. He was to meet Anthony Giacalone and Anthony Tony Provenzano, both mob-connected men. Neither of them showed up. Witnesses later observed Hoffa getting into a burgundy Mercury Marquis with 3 men. His hair was subsequently discovered inside that vehicle. The driver was suspected to be Charles "Chucky" O'Brien, a longtime associate of Hoffa. Hoffa was never heard from again. Speculation about his destiny went wild: buried under Giant Stadium, packed into a steel drum in the bottom of the Great Lakes, fed to swine, secretly cremated. Each tip went nowhere. The FBI pursued tips across farms, dumps, and even under bridges. Media splash excavations attracted cameras but nothing. Hoffa was legally declared dead by 1982. But his myth only expanded. The Milwaukee discovery turns all this on its head. Hoffa's body wasn't burned, wasn't buried under a stadium in New Jersey, wasn't annihilated. He was relocated, kept secret for 2 decades before being interred under third base of Milwaukee County Stadium. The second corpse hints that Hoffa wasn't alone in being a victim of this conspiracy. Maybe someone who assisted in moving him was also silenced. The FBI continues to be tight-lipped, but rumors abound. Was Hoffa kept alive past 1975, sequestered before being murdered subsequently? Or was he preserved and buried years later to keep him out of sight? Either scenario, the disclosure establishes the mob's influence was even more extensive than previously thought. They didn't merely assassinate Hoffa, they rewrote history for